Yes. So, Rob Haddad, let's get an intro going. Tell us what we're doing.
Well, Munir, we have a very special Yo Munir today. As you can see, our good friend Ken Gibbs Jr. has joined us. I met Ken when he
Oh,
was Vice President of Digital Video and Social Content at Paramount. He's a leader in digital marketing. And at the time, I was seeking his validation on social strategy and distribution tools while I was at Social Flow. Um, Ken, Ken has a vast experience working across music and cultural marketing, and someone I greatly admire in the industry. I call him the people's CMO. And beyond Paramount, Ken has worked at AOL, BET, Spotify, Amazon. And since this show is about past, present, and future of marketing and what's in our LinkedIn feed, and Ken's post about creating for the algorithm or the audiences led him to this spot as our first guest ever on Yo Munir. So, welcome, Ken.
thanks so much. Thanks so much. That is a very gracious introduction. I think the only thing that may have been missing is a mention of Frantz Cayo, because I think he somehow factored into that introduction, or our introduction rather.
100%. So, when you're reaching out to somebody you've never met before, having a mutual, a trusted advisor, if you will, of the um, regality of Franz's stature to confirm to both of us that we should know each other is a blessing. Franz, if you're listening, he would be a great guest on the show too. Not to
Let's
talk about
focus
your
on the present.
exactly, exactly. You're right.
So what's
Franz,
the
much love.
format? I know this is fresh. Let's get into it.
I love it. I love it. Well, one of the things that because we had discussed, Munir and I had discussed creating for the algorithm versus the audience. I just love a little take right now on what you're seeing in your LinkedIn feed, and also the algorithm versus audience as a marketer is kind of a is it brand or audience in some regards too. I don't know if that.
Yes, because each brand is going to approach the algorithm differently, right? I think like a sports brand, for instance, versus a financial company, right? Each of them will approach it very differently and find ways to ride and exploit it very differently, right? Um, what I'm seeing in my LinkedIn feed right now, a lot of conversations about what is TV, right? YouTube is taking over. Everyone is seeing that top the charts in all metrics from a viewership perspective. And I think for me, what that is going to force us to all question and really recognize, because it's only going to get worse going forward for the established industry, is the distinction between the industry and the audience, right? There is a TV industry, but to the audience, there is a TV in the room, right? And now that audience has the opportunity to put whatever they choose on that TV in the room. We've got TVs in our pockets and TVs in the room. And that's really how the audience looks at this, right? They watch the same YouTube that they watch in the big screen in their pocket now, right? If you're watching something as an individual within a room, a connected room, as more and more will be going forward, you can put it on the screen for us all to share right now. That is the experience that the audience expects and that they are now gravitating to as the numbers are showing. The TV industry, right, is like the same product built around an economic structure that's no longer sustainable because of that consumption habit and expectation of the audience. All right? And I think like where everyone's like, oh, that's not TV. And so this is what I always say. And I think this is also something in hindsight that we can see has always proven out this theory. Fast and Furious is not winning any Oscars. right? No shade, right? I love it, right? And I know you got a connection to Luda, right? But the people give it an Oscar every time it comes out. Why? Because it wins the box office. They go, right? But we've got this award show ceremony that's celebrating the industry. And now that distinction is really being called into question. That's my little pulpit speech.
It's profound. And if you think about audience first and industry starts to get built up upon itself, and you see these tactile shifts. You saw it with music, something you can speak to as well, and the atomization of an album, and the fact that all albums now can be in your pocket as well. Um, how do you see there's a consumer led adoption phase. There was a time when we created content differently for the small screen versus the big screen, but you're tapping into something very profound in the fact that you can actually now create content to be ubiquitous because it's going to be, to your point, the ability to share what's in my pocket to the screen with people is interesting. And when you're creating that content, do you find that people have cracked this yet? Are they understanding the sharing aspect that you're talking about when they're creating content?
Who is that?
In this case, I would say, well, let's go. That's great. That's an even better question. So let's go. TV industry now has, I talk about this all the time. I work in advertising, and we talk about the fact that people see more SNL on snippets. And so even though there's a long form program, it was always a sketch show. So it's created in a way that actually lends itself to this capacity to be short form content as well. And people share around their favorite clip. Do you think there's does TV industry are they catching on? And then on the other side of that, are there ground or grassroots content creators that are actually going upstream? So they are creating for themselves and then being able to bring that up to a much larger audience, to your Fast and the Furious point, like Mr. Beast.
Yes, yes. So two things there. One, SNL is always brought up, and while I do agree that I see more clips than I do the entire show in the linear experience, I think people forget that SNL is almost like an American heritage brand, right? So I think there's a lot of tolerance for the viewership that it doesn't get on linear in good or bad times, and it's still going to be here, right? And so the social traction that it gets is kind of validation in this new age for this old and aging franchise, right? Like, oh, we see the clips on social. We see a lot more clips of The Daily Show on social, right? So it's something to help SNL stay in the conversation to me, right? And so that's my just thought on SNL as it relates to whether or not TV is catching up. For me, again, TV is anybody who's making content in a studio and like not in something homemade, right? Like the big dogs to an extent. So to that end, I would say yes, and here's why. One, a leader is Revolt, period. Why? Drink Champs, right? It's on Revolt, it's on YouTube, all platforms. Great. Like they've got a great model there, right? Size of network, okay, arguable. I get it. Look at what Tubi's going to do, right? Tubi now has Kudzi from TikTok, right? They will start to incorporate creators into the streaming platform to a wider audience, right? Basically, kind of giving them a more uh, not streamlined, but managed ecosystem of creators than YouTube, but a similar experience, right? And to your last point, yes, the creators are going upstream. Mr. Beast. I think that's somewhat inevitable because at the end of the day, overall, creative is like, uh, and it's been this way since the dawn of time, right? Like kings commissioning sculptures and all that, right? It's like creators they get loans, access to capital for, they get loans that provide them access to distribution, more so today, right? And that's just what's going to happen. They get bigger and bigger, and more people want to partner with them because the returns can be greater. So you see, Mr. Beast does his show with Amazon, right?
Yeah.
That's more and more of those opportunities will be available to more and more artists as they grow. And you see also music artists starting to do these partnerships,
Mhm.
right? Kendrick and his partnership with Amazon, concerts, exclusive material streamed on the platform, yada yada. So yes, inevitably, like the bigger you get as an artist or creator of any type, more and more people will want to partner with you to get access to the audiences that you've generated.
And how does the classic model with the sale of basically broadcast rights, like the a signal, which towers and signals is what it used to be, and then the news, which was a public right and a public good for a while, and seems to now become entertainment eyes. Do you think about that too, or where does the news go?
Yeah, yeah. Wow, this is an intense conversation or part of the conversation, right? Because I think we've underestimated how crucial pure news and journalistic integrity are to overall governance of society, plain and simple, right? And it's we're kind of seeing the effects of that. Not to get too deep into all of what's happening now within our country, but yeah, I think if the news is to rely on its current, like the current media monetization structure, it's not going to survive, period. Right? Everyone will listen to who they want to and have their own truths, because that's inevitable when there is no central confirmed source of information. And we got ourselves here, right? Because it was never fair and balanced to begin with. So many people had reasons to distrust, and we had a long time to work that out, you know. So those are just things to think about.
I'm wondering if the fragmentation of media, as it pertains to news as well, has also created opportunities for the distribution of journalism that may have been excluded from mainstream media in the 50s and 60s when we only had three or four broadcasters who were broadcasting news. I'm aligned in terms of the harm a culture that doesn't value news and journalism and integrity and ethics, right? These are cultural values that we should be worried and concerned about losing and fighting for. But I also, as not a media historian, think about a time in which there wasn't a diversification or even diversity of news sources when there was ABC, CBS, and NBC.
No, true. So it does provide for it, right? Ubiquitous unchecked distribution creates limitless opportunities for news entities to be created, right? But ultimately, it then just becomes a math problem, right? In terms of how you monetize. Do you achieve enough scale to have either ad supported, subscription, combination of both? How do you have to kind of diversify your offering to do so? At what scale do you achieve or do you need to be at in order to be able to diversify your offering in that way, right? A la the New York Times, right? Like they're probably the best doing it. right? But news is expensive, right? Like you've got this long period, right, in which reporters are out there collecting information, what have you. Like that's a hell of a T&E, right? Product has yet to be delivered, right? Like it is what it is, right? And so when you're talking about news and everyone having their own truths, you know, like the pie is being sliced in but so many ways.
Yeah, that definitely a concern. Go ahead, Munir. No, no.
I was going to talk about you talk about individuals who are gaining audience at scale, and then we talk about the fragmentation of audiences. Is there a capacity in this new age for the individuals that have those smaller audiences to expand out to gain larger audiences? And then, to your point, what is the journalistic integrity or the trust level, or are there or does there need to be some type of regulation, which then starts to get governmental and societal over the top of that, or should they be able to run free?
Okay, two big questions there. One, I do think people will continue to rise from the pack, essentially, right? And achieve scale. Um, like viral, as cliche as it is just increasingly more and more of an option, right? As more and more people get online, more and more people do things, you can have your moment, right? How you will monetize that, how you will retain that audience, those are the things, right? Is that part of the plan? Are you just putting content out there? All of those things will factor into that, right? But I think so, yes, right? I mean, hey, look at Hollywood. This is essentially Hollywood at scale, right? People are out there waiting tables, doing whatever just so they could get their big break. And it might take years, right? So people will be willing to do so if they can monetize that career without having to maybe travel from, Kentucky to LA, right? If so, as long as that's possible, I think we'll continue to see that. The other question, give me that one again.
The other question was, as you're beginning to get these people that have come from small to large, which we're saying, yes, that's absolutely possible, then they get audience, and maybe to your point, maybe it's for a short period of time, maybe it's for a longer period of time. Is there any point at which there should be regulation on top of what they might want to say?
I, I personally, yes, I think so. Right? Will it happen? I don't think so. Um, Simply because there's a lot of money involved.
Sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of money involved, and it does get into the free speech territory,
Of
you know.
course.
And I think because of that, you look at the government's need for sponsorship of pure and trusted news sources, right? Big fan of NPR, PBS, all of these things. And I think it's because if we don't have something that we can all look to and trust, and we all kind of go down these rabbit holes, then there's the opportunity for anyone who kind of gains that larger share of audience to, not only monetize it, but evolve onto other things as well,
Yeah,
right? So I
absolutely.
do think there's just that need and there's always that concern, right? Like I put it like this, right? If you want to gather more than 5,000 people in public, you need a permit.
Right.
Why? Why? Why do you need that permit?
Right.
Because we think that something could possibly happen,
Yeah.
right? Yet online, you monetize by amassing much larger audiences,
Right.
right? That you can then translate into physical spaces, yada yada. So you have these followings, and these virtual followings we have seen do translate into physical ones. So there's need to, I think, further examine and possibly regulate that.
The
Profound. Thank you.
responsibility of having a certain number of followers or audience or engagement requires a different level of
Yeah.
regulation potentially. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is, but it's something to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right now,
For instance,
the platforms self-regulate. and we're trusting upon the platforms to help us with that.
Yeah. And so we've seen, I forget the name. It's happened more than once. I think one was with Speed. Is it one of the influencers? Was in New York or something like that, like doing a giveaway. No, Kai Cenat, Kai Cenat. And it was like a mob, right? And he
Yeah.
may have gotten arrested, something like that. Like these things can happen, right? And so, I mean, and these are that's positive. I mean, it had negative effects, what have you, but no one really got hurt. But he wasn't there with ill intent,
Right.
right? But what if he
Right.
were?
Right.
It was
Right.
August 2023. It was a giveaway promotion in Union Square. Yeah. You know, what your expertise is founded in um, your experience starting podcasts at AOL.
Yes.
I mean, you are an OG when it comes to podcasts, and I think that's important to share your experiences there because everything that we're talking about is building audiences outside of a traditional framework of linear television and media, radio and linear television, and you had the opportunity to start in the very early days of podcasting to do everything that we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes. So share a little bit about the early days and what you were tasked with doing and what, some of that looked like.
So I mean, that's like what's interesting about that is we call it podcast because of a product that is no longer here, right? And and I really do think that leans into this conversation about what is TV, right?
Yeah.
Right. But to get to the point, so podcasts, like basically AOL, as they started to really get into the content space, had to make sure they had content offerings for all new platforms, right? The iPod was a big product. Even it was kind of taken off in the space that AOL was, like this techie geek chat room space as well. And me being on the Black Voices side, basically, I always wanted to make sure our product, our audience had access to and content on these platforms. So we had a full, like down in AOL Dulles, VA, the CCs, because I was down in VA for a while. Basically, I used to fly in on Monday, fly out Friday, like building out Black Voices for the year, right? And we had a studio down there, full recording studio. Right? So I launched More Than Words, a podcast. So I was the entertainment editor, program director there, eventually became program director. But in my duties as entertainment editor, I had music, movies, TV, books. So we didn't really have any offering in the book space. Like music was a bit harder to get access to talent from a brand perspective. We weren't that strong. Talent didn't see the need. Books were something that like authors were like, who wants to talk to me? Right. So we, we were able to get them to like they had the book convention in DC. We had a lot of access to publishers. I had a writing background, all of that. So launched that podcast, really introduced me to the technology. I always saw like the net as being to your earlier point of news not having or not every community having representation in the news space, right? Um, Most of that traditionally has been due to lack of access to distribution, right? Oh, like the easiest thing of all three. So you got print, audio, TV. First, those communities started having their own papers, Amsterdam News, what have you, right? Then you see radio stations, yada, yada. Then, as the price of access to distribution gets higher, you see fewer and fewer of these brands, right? BET, TV One, that's it, right? So I looked at podcasts as saying, okay, this is audio for it was primarily audio back then, format for community to have access representation to. Launched the podcast. It was great. I'm trying to. I don't. Oh, so one of like the best things that happened there was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar came into the studio as a guest to promote his book, right? And so it's like me, the engineer, and Kareem sitting there talking. And like it would have been great if YouTube was around so that we could
Yeah.
have video of this,
Oh my
But I
goodness,
got
yeah.
yeah, I got all the audio. Um, and that kind of like so I learned the value in accessing a platform early, but also the the realities of being a pioneer. It was hard to find an audience for it back then,
Right.
right? And so my learning was like there's an ecosystem that's out there, essentially blogs. You're trying to spread communication about your content to this ecosystem. Blogs as independent publishers need something that's going to pull the audience into their platform, right? A little audio link, that's not going to do it. People are scrolling right past that, right? If you've got video, once YouTube and all that came about, you had value to the ecosystem, right? You made moments that they could see and build context about around for their audience, right? So fast forward like 10 years later almost, because this was like early 2002, so 10 years or so later, I meet Reggie Osei. He's doing the Combat Jack show. He's all on the audio, like, theater of the mind, the audience. And I was with it because I was a big Howard Stern fan, and I recognized that he had the characters to bring in that audience, right?
Right.
But again, value to the ecosystem, you know, they didn't they didn't have it as an audio product. So I was like, hey, let me bring some cameras in here. We'll get videos out, start putting it on YouTube, sending it out to the blogs. We had Fabulous, who was then on VH1, uh, Real Housewives or something, one of the reality shows,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Either way, the clip got picked up by YBF, and the brand's out there. They started to move, got on Complex. So that's like my podcast journey.
Amazing. Do you see new platforms emerging with the advent of AI, both social media platforms or distribution, if you want to be more broad, and then maybe devices? Do you foresee that, or are you still looking at it in the landscape that it is at the moment and projecting just kind of that continued move of TV everywhere?
Think so. From a device standpoint, I do think we will see a shift. There was a nonfiction book that, well, no, a fiction book that I featured the author on that podcast back in the day. And his whole thing was there was like this piece on your necklace that you carried around. And it was like what Siri is supposed to be, right? And it had moved past the screen and had understanding of everything, connection, what have you. I think we'll get there because I also think you're starting to see it with OpenAI and like how the agents can speak to one another, like ChatGPT and Spotify, for instance, right? Like apps and services that I can pay for, subscribe to, but don't need to look at the screen to monetize via ads. Like that, I think that will come become a part of the experience from a
Great.
device
So just as
standpoint.
kind of Google is this, or was this search engine for text of the internet, essentially the ability to annotate the internet, something that Genius um, had as an objective when they were annotating lyrics and meaning. Their larger mission was actually to annotate the internet. I don't know if that's still on their website, but we were working with them back in the social flow days, and that was their core objective, was to annotate the internet. We're thinking that all of these GPTs are essentially going to be an interface for us to query every app that we're connected to and deliver us the experience that we're having through that interface. So if I want to listen to Spotify or any streaming music, I'll always interact first with my agent or my GPT, and the app will be in the background.
Yes, yes. But I think you're kind of getting back to square one with the problem, though, right? So Spotify is monetized. Well, Spotify, let's take Spotify out of the equation because they've got the free product, right? And that kind of gives them scale and what have you. But I think you could probably still have that because it's music, but they've got access to the asset, which is the music, right? So for apps that monetize through in-app ads, like visual ones, how then do you monetize through a GPT experience without a screen? Right?
Right.
So, like, if we move forward in a certain way, certain things will be left behind. And so we'll see. We'll see. Well, does that mean the experience is going to fracture, or will the overall use case and user experience just evolve in a way that we haven't anticipated?
I was going to say with the partnership of Spotify and Netflix, do we see that as potentially consolidating streaming media opportunities where you'll have two or three real players, but you'll have access to essentially every content, and that we're all studios now? So Warner Brothers Studios is competing with Darman Studios, is competing with Creator Y Studios, and so on and so forth. And suddenly we have millions of studios that are content creators and really only a few distribution platforms because we all have partnerships with these, top of the pyramid. Or are we going to continue to see more and more niche platforms, i.e., channels that we used to tune into, where we'll have distribution of really specific content or really specific creators that speak to a community or an audience?
I think you see both. I think you see both, but I think what you'll see going forward that doesn't necessarily exist now, even though again, a la Tubi or Beast, you're seeing more or glimpses of it rather, is that those smaller ones will, based on the value of certain IP, have access to those bigger platforms, right? So let's just say you're a smaller anime studio, right? You're speaking to a niche, but the big player says, "Oh, you know what? I think that'd be great for us." They can give you a deal and license it.
Right.
Yeah.
And you make the choice. Like, I'll take the
Yeah.
money, right, and get the licensing. All right. We've been talking a lot about the future, and you are the CMO for the people. So, what do brands and individuals who are interested in developing or providing their information to an audience do today to get access to an audience, and then also to prepare themselves for the eventualities that you are predicting?
Okay. Okay. What do brands do today to get access to audiences?
I need to build an audience for my brand. What are the top 3 things that I should be thinking about?
Know exactly who they are, all
Okay.
right? And by that I mean you can't go by traditional categories, right? Black male 18 to 34. That bucket is far and wide, right? Like that's ridiculous, right? So let's do some real research into who they are and where they are, right? And by where they are, not from well, also from a geographic perspective, because there are trends and things there that are worth recognizing, but also from a platform perspective, and I would say primarily from a platform perspective, right? 'Cause, and I think that's going to look very different based on your product, yada yada, right? So that's one. Two, know who they like. All right. Who are their friends and their foes? Right. Because in this day and age where everyone has dialogue with the talent in ways like never before, somebody who you don't know who they're connected to could somehow pull you into something that you weren't even aware of, and now
Right.
your product is bearing the brunt of the fallout. Right. So
Yep.
be aware of those things. Do social listening, what have you. But again, deep research. And third, getting an audience. Getting an audience. Um, you find out, and this kind of goes back to the first one, understanding where they are. Establish a dialogue so that you can really like collect and maintain your own relationship with them, right? Because platforms go in and out of vogue, right? It might be it's TikTok today, it might be something else tomorrow. You're gonna have to set up shop there too, right? But who knows? The trend in the future might be not to be on platforms, right? What do you do then? Make sure that you've got your own connection.
Great.
The people CMO has spoken.
The other answer is call Ken.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm here.
That's it.
I'm here.
Oh man, we didn't even find out what's in Munir's LinkedIn feed today.
We don't need to find out what's in my LinkedIn feed when we have such a spirited discussion about what Ken has seen, both short term and the future. Today, we have seen the future. Today, we have learned about what we can do today to prepare ourselves for the future. Ken, thank you so much for being our first guest. That's amazing. And we can't wait. We have to have you on more often. This is like I have been inspired and I have ideas.
Hey, that's great to hear. Thank you both so much for having me. As you can see, I love to talk shop. I can do this all day. I've been doing it for a long time. But I've really enjoyed the conversation.